And slowly but surely, we'll get everybody's attention, and welcome back. We're going to start, even though you don't have your main course, it is coming, but we want to try and make sure we get out on time. And we do have some things we need to cover with you. The 10th anniversary presents a wonderful opportunity to recognize some special people. Any organization needs lots of active people, and we'd like to thank you all for all that you've done over the years. But pick out a couple. It's always dangerous to do that, but we did want to talk to you about a couple of people. And we have some little awards for them. The first person we would like to honor today is the brave person who agreed to be the first president of United Growth, and has been for the last 2 years, and he has survived. And I don't know if anybody's confused, but United Growth as a program started 10 years ago, and then, as Paul was explaining, United Growth incorporated and became an independent organization 2 years ago. So when Extension started the process of spinning off United Growth as its program, Kendra and I were really worried who's going to step up and take the leadership positions. It's really a scary part in an organization's development, is can you have really good people take and assume the responsibilities. And we've been very fortunate at the high caliber of board members who did agree and were actually elected to the board. And we were especially pleased that someone with Paul Hahn's skills and abilities agreed to be president. Well, now if I can tell you a little bit about Paul. I first met him when he was a community organizer. He was very young. He was a community organizer at Creston Neighborhood Association. And then a few years later, he became the executive director. And I do think Paul is one of the best community organizers in the history of Grand Rapids, and I've known quite a few. He's done excellent work and even took on the banking industry in Creston when all the banks were leaving Central City neighborhoods. And he and the leaders he worked with in the neighborhood are responsible for a credit union locating in the neighborhood and making a financial institution and its services available to the residents and businesses there. Then Paul continued his professional career by starting the Get the Lead Out program, which I think most of you are aware of. It's now morphed into the Healthy Homes Coalition. And they have done significant reduction of lead poisoning in children in Grand Rapids and I think other places. And it's due to Paul's efforts and the rest of the coalition. Paul loves to hike. You might know that he walked the Appalachian Trail in its entirety. He was in such good shape then when he was younger. And I have a couple of props. If you've noticed this adorable little girl on most of United Growth's literature eating an apple from the fruit ridge, that's Paul's daughter. Paul was, he alluded to this in his remarks, he was one of the first members of the Urban Committee and stayed active on the committee, which is now called the Revitalizing Neighborhoods Committee, for the full 10 years of United Growth's history. In fact, he's chaired the Revitalizing Neighborhoods Committee for the last couple of years, in addition to being president of United Growth. So, Paul, we would like to thank you for your good leadership and all of your contributions to United Growth. You want to say a few words?
I don't know that I want to say a few words. I said them earlier, but I really appreciate the recognition. And it means a lot coming from you personally, Carol. So thanks for the award.
On to our next one. And, on United Growth, we do urban and we do rural. Paul is urban, so of course you can guess. Our next person is Burl. Now, since this person has no idea she is receiving this award, I think I better tell her now that she's receiving it so she can think of something to say when we present her with the award, because we'll want to hear from her. So, Marcia Wilcox, where did you go? There she is. Now you wondered why I was asking you all those questions on the right over here. Okay. As many of you know, Marcia has been a dairy farmer for some time, but I just learned today that she's not. She and her husband are no longer dairy farmers. They have tried to ease a little bit into semi-retirement, but they have a very large farm, and they raise beef cattle and crops and do rent out some of their other acreage. And I don't think I mentioned that the farm is in Virgins. She grew up in this area and knows absolutely everyone in the whole Lowell area. She is an avid turkey hunter, a proud grandma, and I learned she also is a deer hunter. So she's got just a wide variety of interest and skills. Personally, I admire Marcia for her political involvement in the community. She was a school board member, Virgins Township trustee, and a Kent County commissioner. And she was the supervisor. She was Virgins supervisor, and she was the first woman to be the supervisor there. I mean, I think she's been just a great pioneer in doing things in the rural areas of Kent County. Marcia is extremely passionate about land preservation. She was an early supporter of the Purchase of Development Rights program. She's been an active member of United Growth's Rural Committee, which is now called the Land Preservation Education Committee. In fact, she chairs that committee and was instrumental. I have another prop. She was instrumental in helping to develop this land preservation guide. And do we have copies back there if anybody hasn't seen them before? And what the committee is doing under Marcia's leadership is identifying farmers and taking this brochure to them in a personal visit and talking to them about the number of different ways that you can preserve your land. This is something that's been one of her pet projects, and she has just had such great leadership on it. It has been a personal pleasure for me and Kendra to work with Marcia. She is one of the people I always say I never would have had a chance to meet her if not for United Growth, because like Paul said, you just do city people or you just do township people, and it's been a great pleasure. So Marcia, please come up and let us thank you for your leadership and all of your contributions to United Growth. Was this a surprise? Can you say a few words?
Carol was talking about somebody else. Thank you so much. This is such a wonderful group to work with. The idea of, when Dave Geikema came with the idea that you can't stop urban sprawl without fixing things in the central city and without having rural people commit to land preservation and keeping agriculture going in the outskirts around the city. We said that idea sounds like it'll work. It sounds like the solution. And so I think that's why most of the people here have stuck by us for 10 years, because it's an idea that works. So.
Okay, great. Thank you. United Growth Board is dedicating a brick in Paul's honor and in Marcia's honor to the Grand Ideas Garden right next to the Extension Office. And the board is also doing a United Growth brick to commemorate the 10 years of existence. Now we have 2 other people. Gosh, they don't have the entree yet, so I'll keep going here. And Birgit, you're not going to get to eat, but we'll eat dessert together. Okay, I've got 2 more people that we want to recognize. They don't get bricks, but we wanted to just recognize them. Paul has already said that Christine Helms-Miletic has been one of the original board members, has served for 2 years, and is going off the board. She's also been the secretary of the Revitalizing Neighborhoods Committee for a couple of years and an active member of the zoning subcommittee, which she cannot leave. But she is stepping down from the board of directors, but she's going to remain active on the Revitalizing Neighborhoods Committee. So we have a little certificate for you, Christine, to thank you for your leadership and contributions. Do you want to say anything, or you're going to say stuff?
I'll say thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, you're going to hear from Christine later. Now, there are several people in this room who do know about this next little piece of recognition that we're going to go through. Oh, I don't need my notes. I can say this. There is one person here, though, who doesn't have a clue about what's going on, and she is the one who developed the agenda and everything else for this fine event today. It was 10 years ago this month that MSU Extension hired Kendra Gunter as the coordinator for for a land use project. We didn't have a name yet. And the name of the project became United Growth, and Gunter became Wills. So we wanted to take this opportunity to recognize Kendra's 10 years with Extension and 10 years with United Growth. Instead of a certificate, we decided to give her a gift card to Bigsby because I don't know if everybody knows, she has started a master's program at Aquinas, and she needs a lot of caffeine to stay up studying at night. So Kendra, come on up and get your gift certificate.
Oh, my daughter would just say, "You're such a stinker." I didn't know that she was doing that. Thank you very much, Carol. I'll get you back. Okay.
And now I'd like to introduce Kim Van Dyke, who is a United Growth board member, member of the Revitalizing Neighborhoods Committee, and Executive Director of Neighborhood Ventures. And she's going to introduce our speaker, Kim.
Thank you, Carol. It is my pleasure today to introduce Ms. Birgit Klohs. Birgit is the president and CEO of the Right Place Incorporated, which is a regional economic development organization for the retention, expansion, and recruitment of businesses in the greater Grand Rapids area. Ms. Klohs is a native of Germany, and she came to us from Grand Valley State University. She worked for the Prince Corporation in Holland, Michigan before that, and she started her career in 1977 as the industrial consultant with the Economic Development Corporation of Berrien County, Michigan. She is a graduate of Western Michigan University, where she later served on the Board of Trustees from 1997 to 2004. She also is a graduate of the Economic Development Institute of the University of Oklahoma. Birgit is a frequent speaker in at international conferences and seminars, and she has lectured in Great Britain, France, Germany, Sweden, Australia, and probably many other places. She's also involved in numerous local and statewide organizations, including the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, Spectrum Health Systems Board of Directors, Van Andel Public Museum, and many other organizations. She is the recipient of many awards, which I will not name all of them, but some of them include the 2006 Grand Rapids Business Journal 50 Most Influential Women in West Michigan, and the 2007 Grand Rapids Area Chamber of Commerce Athena Awards. It has been my pleasure to know Birgit for several years now, and I really admire and appreciate her passion for the region and her vision for sustainable economic development for the region. Please help me in welcoming Birgit Klohs.
Thanks, Kim. I think I'm going to grab my water. Well, thank you very much. And I see some familiar faces in the room. We have known each other a long time. Some of you I have not met. So what I'd like to do today is give you a little bit of the history of the Right Place. I think it's kind of important. And some of our success stories over the last year, in spite of all the gloom out there. And I'm not going to tell you today that everything is great out in the world. And also share with you our strategic priorities and how, in fact, what we do impacts what you do, and what you do is critical to what we do. When this organization was founded 10 years ago, and by the way, congratulations, surviving 10 years in a nonprofit and is quite a feat, as I can tell you, running one myself for 22 years. At that time, we already had founded something called the Urban Redevelopment Council, and led by Rick Chapla, who many of you know, and who is still with the Right Place. And we started that council really after the city of Grand Rapids came to us 14 years ago and said, how can we work closer together and really revitalize our urban center? And it became very, very quickly apparent to us that revitalizing an urban center into a vibrant city absolutely has resonance and should resonate with the people in the rural areas of Kent County and surrounding. To us, it was sort of one of those, the kids would say, duh moments. But it became very, very critical. And you're sitting in one of our projects. This was a brownfield project. And I can also tell you that the laws that were passed under former Governor Engler concerning brownfield redevelopment and Renaissance zones became a key player in the revitalization of the city and stopping some of those silly projects that usually go onto farmland. And I think we are very grateful that those two laws came along, and they're still one of the leading laws for urban redevelopment in the country and have been emulated in a lot of other states, mainly Pennsylvania and others, who've had lots of industrial development over the last 100 years and really wanted to revitalize some of these older buildings and bring them back to life. And like I said, you're sitting in one of them, and there are many others. So the connectivity between what you do and what we do is actually quite strong, I think. And I'm also one of these, on a personal basis, one of these strange economic developers who believes that good quality of life and good land use can be a friend of economic development, and we don't have to be one or the other. It's not an either-or proposition. It can be done well, and I've always personally believed that, because having grown up in Europe, we didn't have the space to sprawl the way we do here, and so you can really do coexist very nicely. And in particular today, quality of life in economic development plays a much larger role than it did when I got into this business over 30 years ago. So anyway, having said that, let me just give you a little bit of an overview of the Right Place, about a minute or two of history, just like you are reviewing your history today. But for those of you in the room old enough, and thank God there's those of you in the room old enough, remember the early 80s in this state, and they were just as gruesome and brutal as they are today. The unemployment rate in Michigan in 1981-82 was 17.5%. It's about 10.8 today, and I'm not saying it's not going to go up, but let's hope it isn't going to go to 17%. I was working at that time in Berrien County, and the unemployment rate in the city of Benton Harbor was 28%. And the unemployment rate in Kent County and West Michigan at that time was over 10%. And in 1983, just like you all got together 10 years ago, a group of business leaders of the largest organizations in this community, private organizations, led by Jay Van Andel, and including Steelcase, Mr. Pugh, Mr. Meyer, some of the biggest law firms, Warner Norcross, what was then Seidman & Seidman is now BDO Seidman, Spartan Foods, Old Kent Bank, now Fifth Third, all got together and said, if we don't create a single-focused economic development organization, we will continue to bleed jobs. Nobody will come here because nobody is marketing our community to anybody new. And we will continue to decline. And we as organizations, whether it's Amway or Steelcase or Herman Miller or Hayworth or whoever, will have one heck of a hard time attracting talent because people want to go where other people are successful. So they created what was then known as the Right Place Committee in 1984. So we are celebrating pretty much 25 years this year. And in 1985, this organization actually became operational. Now, we're a self-funded organization, and as is usual in this community and in this region, and I want to tell you, it is an unusual region in that respect. I know colleagues in my industry who do not have those kind of organizations that give philanthropically to organizations like the Right Place, organizations like yours. It really is one of the hallmarks of West Michigan, and we are very, very fortunate to have that kind of business community and philanthropic community, including some very fine foundations. A lot of other places don't. And so when you are here and you have that, you have a tendency to take it for granted, figuring everybody else does too. Sometimes it helps to go out of town to really find out that you are in much better shape than others. But anyway, that same dozen group of folks basically said we will put our own money on the table first, and then we will go to our public sector partners, the county, which is represented here today, our cities and our townships, and say when we create jobs and when we retain jobs, everybody really benefits because somebody with a job can buy a home, they can shop at Meijer, they will create tax base, etc. And we are still funded in that same way. So every 5 years, we have to go around and raise our own operating money. And we are in the process of doing that. This is not the easiest time to raise money from anybody, I can tell you that right now, but we are in the process of trying to raise $10 million, $2 million a year for the next 5 years. And we have raised thus far about $3.4 million, which is pretty darn good, given the times we're in. But everyone we have talked to so far and which has reinvested, and we consider them investors. This is not philanthropy at the normal philanthropy level. This is an investment in the future of this region to keep jobs so people can work. Have said to us when we've met, both in groups and individually, we need a Right Place now more than ever. If there wasn't one, we would have to create one. So we have obviously been, and we have to show success, and I want to share that success with you a little bit today of what we have actually done over the last 5 years, because we measure ourselves. We have to give our investors a report card that says, okay, you gave us $100,000 over 5 years, here's what we did with it. And by the way, I'm going to leave this at the front desk before I leave. I have copies for everybody of this. But 5 years ago, we raised $5.6 million, or about $1.1 million a year. We get some federal grants that are not included in that. And we leveraged that into $467 million of new investment. That's given the state we're in, given the state the economy is in, that's a pretty darn good number, I would say. If we had those returns on the market today, we'd all be in. Our 401ks would be 401ks. We had over $228 million in new payroll, and our goal was $75 million, and I'll talk about that number in a minute. We had over 8,300 new or retained jobs. And when we talk about retained jobs, we talk about a company that is local, that is potentially looking to expand elsewhere. Okay? So pick a company that is planning on going to Indiana, not moving out of here, but rather going elsewhere for expansions, and we kept that expansion here. Those are retained and new jobs. Or we bring a new company to the area from somewhere else. And last year we, and I'll talk about a couple of those, we had prospects from 21 states and 7 countries. And so I'll talk a little bit about our attraction strategy in a minute. So, and we assisted over 2,000 companies in one way or another. So last year was a banner year for us. We did over $70 million in new investment and some very interesting companies. And it goes to what I want to talk to you about in a minute, and that's the diversification of our base in this area. We had companies from furniture companies like Davidson Plyforms and Genesis Seating. They are taking over the old Yamaha plant. We located Priceline here. It got a lot of play. That was a very, very interesting project. Priceline had bought Bookings.com, which is actually a Dutch company, 2 years ago, and they wanted the Bookings people to have a U.S. location. And our world, because of the internet today, is way different than when I started in this business, and I was like 15 then. But the internet has changed how companies search out a community. It has changed 180 degrees. It used to be that I could meet with Alan, establish a relationship. He was looking for a site. We could really do this over the long term and over a year or 2 or 3, because our sales cycle is pretty long. You finally get Alan to make the decision to locate a new plant here. Today, 90% of all site searches for new locations are done by a third party, a site consultant who, before they ever even come to us or my colleagues in Kalamazoo or my colleagues in Lansing, will have gone on a website, decided if this community looks good to them, at least statistically, and you will never have known that you either were on or off the list. And that's what happened to Priceline. They looked at 100, that's 100 communities' websites before they ever came to us. So they did their research around statistics, they did their research around will this fit, and one day on April the 3rd or 8th last year, we got a phone call from the consultant who said, you are one of 3 finalists. We had no idea we were on the list. And we didn't know for the longest time who the company was, because that was the whole idea. The company today doesn't necessarily want to work with us directly. They want a third party who does all that hard work, which actually we do. We just don't know who the end user is. Another very interesting company we worked with was called Sequinome. It's a company out of San Diego, California. They bought a lab up on Michigan Street Hill in the Cook DeVos Center for the Health Sciences. They're going to do research, very sophisticated prenatal research, and they're going to create, and they're actually going to locate in the city, and they're going to create over 5 years about 500 new jobs. So those are just 2, and we had lots more last year. And this is only March of 2009, and we've already done $33 million of expansions this year. So the headlines may be gloomy, but we're seeing some good stuff. So let me just take you quickly through our strategic plan and how that, and some of what that relates to you, particularly in the whole rural urban scenario. But anyway, we have 3 strategic priorities, and like I said, I'll leave this with Kendra, and you can pick it up. Our number 1 goal always remains the retention of what we already have. It is very difficult to attract somebody to a community where the existing companies are leaving. Now, I talked to a board member from a new organization in Lansing, LEAP, and it's always the sexy part of the business is always that foreign company that comes from Germany or Spain or whatever. And we've done very well there. But as I had to remind him, I've been doing this now for this organization for 22 years. And but if you do not retain what you have first, if you lose Lax or AutoCam or whatever to somewhere else, for me to explain to a German company, why did one of your best companies leave, is a very, very hard conversation. So we are very, very, very focused. And I don't care what business you're in. All of us are in sales somewhere, okay? I don't care if you do development for Aquinas College. You don't want to lose the donor, to some other organization. You want him to spend that money at his alma mater. So we are all in sales. I don't care if you're a lawyer or a doctor or an economic developer. So you want to retain the customer you have. It takes 5 times as long to get a new one than to keep the old one. So we work very, very, very hard with our existing base of businesses. And the key word here is base. And we work with the economic base, which in a lot of cases in West Michigan is still manufacturing. They are not dying. They are not dying. And we need them. They pay better. There is high skill there. And they create wealth. And if you do not create wealth, shopping on Wealthy Street is not possible. Okay? You have to export either a good or a service to create wealth. And then you have a vibrant retail sector. Then and only then. There are exceptions, Meijer being one. They're headquartered here. They're importing money from their stores in Illinois. So they're a wealth creator. But you're not going to go buy that fabulous bouquet of roses at Eastern Floral if you don't have a good income. So retention is first, and we call on almost 300 companies a year, and the majority of new jobs still get created by companies you already have. So, for instance, 2 weeks ago, we did a huge diversification summit. We had over 300 manufacturing representatives. We held it at Grand Valley because we wanted to introduce the folks who are currently auto and or office furniture suppliers to what's new out there, so to what are the opportunities in other areas, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Clearly, we are the regional marketing organization, and we've been very successful. We do it in a variety of ways. We attend trade shows that are dead in the sweet spot of the new kinds of industries that we have identified as key where we can grow. Don't try to develop an industry where you don't have a stake in the ground. I mean, it doesn't work. You cannot create something from whole cloth. And we do very, very targeted marketing trips. I'm leaving on Saturday. I have 22 appointments in Germany. I'm speaking at an alternative energy conference in Berlin on the 1st of April. Because we believe, and I'll talk about that in a minute, that we have a serious opportunity in that industry. And we certainly continue the work that Rick has started in terms of sustainable land and building use. And we really, really mean that. We would much rather assist the old Lair building, which we worked on with the Buchanan family, rehab it, gave them a brownfield tax credit. It's half full. They're building on to the front. Rather than having there's a 50-acre site there with water and sewer and roads, and reuse what we have and rehab it, then drag out 50 miles of water and sewer line to some greenfield. Now, if I have somebody who needs 50 acres of a greenfield, we'll have to talk about that. But lately, a lot of the prospects we've had through here love our existing buildings. And we have a good supply of them, fortunately or unfortunately, because of contractions in other companies. And Priceline took the old Smith Industries headquarters at the corner of 44th and Eastern. Okay, so and the way things are working, which is very interesting. People want to lease buildings. They want to do it quickly. Everybody's in a hurry. And so having a good inventory of existing buildings is terrific for our marketing purposes. But we've always felt very strongly that we want to reuse what we have because the investment has already been made once. Some things you can't, some things you can. But if you look around town, and even now in Kentwood and elsewhere, what can you do with it? Biggest brownfield project we're going to have here is unfortunately the big General Motors plant. Okay. It's going to close the end of this year. You're talking about 93 acres that needs to be cleaned up, I'm sure, with a 2 million square foot building. And we are already meeting and have been, what can we do with that? It has water, it has sewer, it has rail, it is on a major freeway. There has to be a user. So we are very much believers in the whole idea of sustainable development. In fact, I have a director of sustainability on our staff. Emerging opportunities. Clearly we are, and Al and I talked about this over lunch, this is not your garden variety recession. This is truly a reinvention of the country and the state and this region. We are going through a total shift. And it is like going from agriculture to industrial. We're going from industrial to post-industrial. And I don't mean manufacturing is going to go away, but it is not your granddaddy's manufacturing plant. And the skills that are going to be needed today versus even 10 years ago are way, way different, okay? It's going to be much more post-high school education at the community college, and that means, and we talked about that at lunch too, I don't know what we're going to do with all the dropouts, because you will not get a job without a skill. It's that in the 50s, 60% of our jobs in this country were unskilled, 20% skilled, and 20% required a college education. Today it's 60% skilled, 20% a college education, and 20% unskilled. And I will tell you that that's beginning to change. If you're making pieces and parts that can be made in China, it's over. So you have to have value add in that process, okay? So our goal on diversification is clearly we want to continue to transition our local manufacturers to become advanced manufacturers, potentially having their own proprietary products. Because many of them today are making, pieces and parts, 50 gazillion of them for an automobile industry that is also changing. We are very, very much engaged, of course, in the whole life sciences. And I can tell you very, very honestly that if you had told me 15 years ago that we would have what's happening in the city of Grand Rapids around the life sciences and the health sciences, and that I would be marketing that kind of industry, I would have told you you're crazy. Grand Valley is a great university, and they have a wonderful, it's the fastest growing university in the state, but it was not a research university. Next research university was Michigan State, and then of course Ann Arbor and Wayne State, and my alma mater is a Research 2 university. But we did not have in this community a research university. And when Mr. Van Andel and his wife decided they are going to give us as a gift a research institute of this magnitude, it was like manna from heaven, because it gave us at Right Place the opportunity to say, okay, what does that really mean long term? Is it just a building and great original research, or will it lead to other development? And can it lead to spin-offs? We wouldn't have Sequinome, the company from San Diego, if it hadn't been for all of that. So we started creating a strategy around that. Clearly, the Institute is only 13 years old. It's only been open 9 years. The new leader, Dr. Vanderwood, just retired, is a world-class translational researcher from Phoenix. He's absolutely phenomenal. So it will ratchet up the Institute again. You clearly see what's happening with Spectrum and St. Mary's, and of course the missing piece was the Michigan State Med School, and obviously that's that third leg of that very important stool of creating a life science cluster here. Now we're collaborating very closely with Kalamazoo on that, because you had Pfizer down there. Some of that is still left. There are people reinvesting in the life sciences down in Kalamazoo, and we are very strong believers that we can build sort of a triangle between Grand Rapids, Kalamazoo, and the Lakeshore, because you also have Perrigo, which is one of the world's largest over-the-counter drug companies. If you're taking an aspirin and it has Meyer on it, it'll come from Allergan. And they also acquired 2 years ago the second largest pharmaceutical company in Israel. So they're actually doing lots of research now. So it's the life sciences, advanced manufacturing, sustainable products that save you energy, etc. Very, very big on our radar screen, and not just because it's the in thing to talk about. It has become the new buzzword, because we really believe that we cannot keep filling up landfills. There just isn't enough room, and it's not good for the environment. I met with a company in the Netherlands, which is a country of 16 million people. 20 years ago, 80% of their trash went into landfills. 20% of it was recycled. Today, it's the exact opposite. What can we learn from them? How can we bring that technology here? What can we do to make that happen? My personal belief is that eventually we're going to mine landfills. You may laugh at me, but there is copper in there. There is stuff in there that we just threw away. And when commodity prices go back to where they were a year ago, and eventually they will, we're going to have to find this stuff and recycle it. Alternative energy, very, 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 in my opinion, and not just my opinion, very big play for Michigan and very big play for West Michigan. The Right Place did a study a year and a half ago with the West Michigan Strategic Alliance. I think most of you know their work. And to really look at, there was, no pun intended, a lot of wind out there about wind energy. And we wanted to know, is that really an opportunity, or is that just, talk and, whatever. So we commissioned our own white paper. We figured, okay, let's figure out what it is, what it isn't. And actually, the study came back and said, yeah, no kidding, you've got Lake Michigan over here. You've got some of the best wind regimes, that's what they call it, in the United States for wind turbines. Okay. So go look for OEMs who may want to locate here. But more importantly, we took our manufacturing base, and this is why I say it's not dead, and I don't want them to die, that we identified 700 manufacturers in our region, and the region in this case is more than 700, that are actually capable of becoming suppliers to the wind turbine industry. There was a big article in last Sunday's paper. We contributed a lot behind the scenes, but you saw a whole raft of companies listed there from, of course, Cascade Engineering. Fred's always on the leading edge with this sort of stuff. But also Burke Porter, Gensing Steel, S2 Yachts, Williams Form up in Belmont by Rockford. They make what are called anchor bolts. These things are about this big. They weigh 100 pounds. When you have to screw the wind turbine tower into the ground, better be holding up. The folks from S2, if you think about it, they made very, very fine boats that are fiberglass boats. Well, a wind turbine blade is made out of the same fiberglass. And so a year ago, we took them with us to Houston to introduce them to, wind turbine manufacturers and what kind of thing needs to go in there. He's got a whole team working on how you can turn, because obviously the boating business went kind of off the cliff in this economy, but he's really excited because he thinks he can take his technology and internally tech transfer it into a new product. So we have a real opportunity there. We had a great announcement last Tuesday or Wednesday. You may have seen it. There is a joint venture between Rockford Construction and a Spanish logistics company called Berhay. We sort of played the matchmaking role and all of that. But when you think about transporting, and I don't know if those of you who have seen it, if you think of transporting all the parts of a wind turbine that is, 2 megawatts, and they're working on 3 megawatts, the tower is 300 feet, the blades are 100 feet, the nacelle is huge, all the gears in there are pretty big. Somebody has to assemble them, get them on a truck or get them on a boat or get them on a train and get them to the site where there's going to be 100 wind turbines being assembled. That requires also a construction company. Ergo, when they called, I suggested some. Obviously, Rockford has those capabilities and is large enough. And that's a very important piece of the supply chain, is the logistics around those wind turbines. I think, and Michigan State did a major analysis, that you will see offshore in our Great Lakes, particularly Lake Huron and Lake Michigan, beyond your cottage view, I know. So that's always the first question. Will I see it from my cottage? Probably not. But RWE, which is one of Europe's largest utility companies, is installing 2,000 turbines in the North Sea off the Dutch coast, of the Netherlands coast. And we believe that their technology is advanced and can eventually be transferred here. So we're talking advanced manufacturing. And again, that's why we need to keep the manufacturers around, because we want those parts to be made here. And if I don't have any of those guys left, then I'm going to have to attract them in here. Now, some of them we don't have, and so part of our attraction strategy is also to find the suppliers that we don't have in the state and in West Michigan to fill in that supply chain gap. Aerospace and defense, not as huge a cluster, but nevertheless, you have some very fine companies here already. And I have a young woman on my team. She's not a staff member, but she is housed with us from the Michigan Economic Development Corporation. She does nothing but help companies through the defense contracting process, which is a challenge, let's just say. Worked with Wolverine not too long ago. They had a contract for boots stuck somewhere in the bureaucracy of the Defense Department, and with the help of General Mark Lott and the young woman who works with us, they shook that thing loose and they got a boot contract. So those are the kind of things we're getting into. Last but not least, our third priority is innovation. We have something called the Innovation Works, where we work very closely with our universities, with entrepreneurs. We have a project going on with an entrepreneur with Calvin right now. And we just got 145 pieces of intellectual property, i.e. patents, that are lodged on our intellectual property portal that people can have access to look at new technology. What we're trying to do is find intellectual property that's not being used, or an entrepreneur who actually has it on his paper napkin, and get it patented, and then find somebody to either buy that intellectual property to make it or connect them with a manufacturer who can make it, etc. So that's really our three priorities that we're working on. Boredom is not part of our problem, but it's still it's a great community to market. It's a great region to market, and I hope that all of you help us do that, because what you do is critical to what we do. Thanks very much. Yes.
What are some of the major concerns of companies coming to West Michigan?
Oh, that's a very good question. They're often around Michigan's, they are not necessarily West Michigan concerns. They are concerns of the business climate in Michigan, okay? So I'll be politically incorrect, but one of the second question usually is how many of the employees and companies in West Michigan have a union? And in our case, that's very low. Skilled labor force is always a question. And the underlining is skilled, which we're particularly in the wind turbine industry. People have been very impressed that we brought here. We did two matchmaking events last year for two big European wind OEMs, and they were extremely impressed with the quality of our labor. The taxing climate is although sometimes it's overstated. There is a brand new national tax analysis out. I just got it literally before I came here. And out of 50 states, Michigan's tax burden ranks 22nd out of 50. Well, now that's not so bad. We are the highest in the Midwest. Wisconsin is 16, and Ohio is about 14. But 22 out of 50 is not as bad as people make it out to be. Now, if I were queen for one day, I would do away with the MBT, the Michigan Business Tax, which has just been terrible, and was a way worse replacement for the single business tax than what we had actually hoped for. Regulatory process is still critical. Not that companies don't understand that there is an environmental process you need to go through. It is the length of time it takes, and time is money. Okay, particularly when you deal with Europeans, they're totally used to having strong environmental regulations, and if you want to have a good environment and a good quality of life, the two have to go hand in hand. One of where I see personally, not necessarily as a question for my companies, where I see a huge problem is in our infrastructure, which is just crumbling around our feet. Okay, and it's not just in Michigan, although we are considered one of the worst, if not the worst state when it comes to our roads, our bridges, our water and sewer lines, and that's a real concern. It's a concern to every good economic developer, because whether you transport people from job to home or you transport goods from here to I-80, it's either going to run on rail or it's going to run on roads. We are great believers that you do not have to build continuously new roads, but fix the ones you have and make them better so you don't have to spend money on them every 2 years. The Europeans have figured this out. We should be too. Rick is working a lot with rail. We are seeing a resurgence in rail. It goes up and down with the gas prices, of course. When gas prices were $4, there was a lot. But the rail line from here, from Kalamazoo to Elkhart, has just been acquired by a company called Watco. And it was sold by Norfolk Southern. So we will have actually a really good rail operator again. And we're dealing with companies who are asking for rail again. So it's one of those things that we let go in this country. Except for us, we kept saying, let's protect, because there were some rail spurs that were supposed to be abandoned, and we always threw ourselves across the railroad tracks to not have that happen. Because we believe that as a peninsula, we need all the transportation ability we can get, and we have, and particularly if you're looking at the wind industry, they look at the Great Lakes, A, for the wind, B, for the transportation network. So long answer to a short question.
Thank you.
You're welcome. They're here. They've got 170 people working in that building. Well, they're there. They hired the first batch. They hired the first batch last year, and they're training them, and they just hired another batch. I shouldn't say that. They hired another group here a few weeks ago. So they got about 150. Kim.
How much, when companies are looking to potentially locate here and or stay here, how much are they looking at quality of life and quality of place in West Michigan? Is that near the top of the list, or is that way further down?
Well, that's a very good question. For those of you who didn't hear in the back, how much does quality of life play a role in either business attraction or business retention? So I'm going to give you another long answer to a short question. When I first got into this business, everybody talked about quality of life, and it's one of those very nebulous terms. What is it to you? What is it to me? To somebody, it's being able to hike. To somebody else, it's going to the opera. To another person, it's going to Lake Michigan. And particularly in the attraction business, it played back then, and I'm talking 10, 15 years ago, a very minor role. Companies searched for the cheapest location with the best labor, and preferably no unions. Okay, so that was it. And by the way, if we're going to build this plant here, everybody ought to be happy to have a job. So everything else, we don't worry about what you do after 5. I will tell you that has changed, because talent today drives a lot of decisions. And not only are we attracting businesses today, but that business often, if it is an attraction business, you also may be bringing talent from Spain or Germany or whatever. But if you have a local company, whether it's a Spectrum Health or an Elticor or the County of Kent, that are going to recruit talent to come to live here, quality of life today plays a very different role in that recruitment process. So what our community looks like, when you bring people in here into downtown GR, and I know not everybody lives in downtown GR, but this is our calling card. And when you see a community that has cranes going up and buildings going up and it's clean and you have good hotels there, it does play a role. Now, but you also have to give them what's after work, okay? Because people are today not just they're trying to get a life-work balance. So what you offer after work, whether it's the lake or the streams or whatever, plays a role, particularly when it comes to attracting talent from elsewhere. And it's one of those things that's taken on almost a life of its own, because particularly young talent supposedly picks the place where they live before they have a job. Not necessarily anymore in this environment, but it plays a much, much, much bigger role. And the other thing that has become very interesting is, particularly in the 25 to 35 range, is they want a really vibrant urban life, but they want to be within a half an hour on that bicycle somewhere in the green. And so bicycle trails and all that kind of stuff, downtown markets, whatever you have, has become a selling point. Will it for a company itself be the deal maker? No. Does it factor in there? Yes. And here's where this business gets very interesting. A site consultant who goes on our website, the first thing he wants to know is, what are the statistics? How many kids in college? How many graduates? What's the labor force like, blah. When you make that cut and you finally get them here, and maybe even you get the owner here, then you have the opportunity to market your community, and then you start a relationship building that goes beyond just the numbers. And so then it becomes very critical. I hope that's long answer to a short question again. So, yes.
You brought big companies.
Yep.
But are you finding that the small business, are we able to attract some of the small businesses also?
Well, it depends on your definition.
Well, you put it as a big player. 150 jobs.
I know.
Small business that might hire 30, 40 people.
Well, that's not so small.
Is that something that you're working on?
Oh, absolutely. But let me just make a definition so we don't. The small businesses we are dealing with are high-tech small businesses. We are strictly into either the small high-tech manufacturer or the life science company with 3 people, or the company that we just did yesterday. When you say small business, the right place, I want to be very careful so I don't step on toes. We are not what Kim does into the small neighborhood retail business. That is not our core competence nor our job. And by the way, we located literally within walking distance of here, a small Swedish company. They started with 1 person. Software company, they now have 20 people, 5 Swedes, and the other ones are almost all local college graduates. So to us, size is not the cutoff. It is what do they do. So in addition to which, to your question, we are working with entrepreneurs now, high-tech entrepreneurs, who may have an idea that needs to find a tool and die maker, an engineer, a prototyping shop, a business plan assistance, but often we kick over to GVSU, but we try to find them the technical assistance. We just had a lawyer who has a client with a very, very interesting nanotechnology. And so we put out the word to our universities if they have a professor in that particular technology expertise. And we had an answer from MSU, we had an answer from another one, so that he can actually validate his technology and potentially start a business. So do we do small ones? Yes, no question, but in very particular areas. I answered everything. All right. Thank you very much.